Hello, everyone, and welcome to Industry Dive and Veeam's The Ultimate Hybrid Cloud Backup Demo Experience webinar. I'm Jeff Gamet. I'll be your moderator today. Now, before we get started, let's go through some quick tips to make sure your webinar experience is the best it can be. At the bottom of your screen are resizable and movable application widgets. Feel free to move them around to make the most of your desktop space. And if you need technical assistance, click the Help widget in the bottom left corner at any time. Now, as the presentation gets underway, you may submit questions using the Q&A widget, and we will answer as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. If a more informative answer is needed, or if we run out of time before we answer your question, we will get back to you with email after the event. Also, after today's presentation, you will receive a link with on-demand access to the webinar, so you can watch it again at any time, as well as share the content with your colleagues. So let's get started. We're joined today by Sam Nicholls and Julia Morgado. Sam is a director for public cloud product marketing at Veeam with more than a decade of sales, alliance management, and product marketing experience in IT. Julia is a global technologist at Veeam Software with a strong background in cloud computing. She regularly shares her experience and expertise at conferences and events worldwide and organizes the New York Code and Coffee Meetup and the Cube Huddle Conference. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it's great that you're here. Okay, so let's get started. As business reliance on cloud services increases, so does complexity. More companies are operating in hybrid and multi-cloud environments, underscoring the importance of a truly capable modern data protection platform. Instead of a fragmented approach to managing data backup and recovery, you can use a single platform to protect your data, regardless of where and how it's stored. Today, Sam and Julia will highlight key areas for hybrid and multi-cloud data protection and give us some live demonstrations showcasing best practices using Veeam's state-of-the-art modern data protection solutions. And I am really looking forward to the discussion, so let's just dive right in. Okay. As companies grow, their on-premises and cloud needs become more complex. That makes it easy for cloud creep to sneak in. Can you explain what cloud creep is and the impact that it has on companies, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Julia, you go first, Julia.
Sure. So from my point of view, cloud creep is when employees start to adopt cloud services without the knowledge of IT, or their authorization. And then they end up putting the company's data in these platforms in the public, and it gets very dangerous. For instance, an example, like if there is a code sharing app, and they are sharing with others the IP address of the company. Not intentionally, it can be intentional, but sometimes not intentional. So yeah, this is what I understand from cloud creep.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. It's we continue to see the data center grow, although not as fast, and like the explosive growth is in the cloud. And like Julia mentioned, the ability to just go and create an account on any one of these platforms, whether it's like the 3 leading hyperscalers, AWS, Azure, Google, or any other platform, create an account, swipe a credit card, and then you've got hundreds, if not thousands, of different services that you can go out there and start utilizing. That presents us a number of problems. Cloud creep, that's what cloud creep is, right? It's adoption of the cloud without some sort of centrally governed experience by IT. And that opens us up to a number of issues, right? Julia mentioned through the security lens, which we're going to get into in a little bit, but certainly there are a number of cloud security best practices and well-architected frameworks that need to be adhered to, and having that central body governing that is going to help from a security perspective. Same thing goes from a cost perspective. The cloud certainly isn't a charity. It's a very attractive model, right? Going from a traditional capital expenditure of procuring, servers and other different types of hardware to something that's instantly instantiated and a pay-as-you-go service, but it has the opportunity to get away from us very, very quickly. So again, that cloud creep, if it's not centrally managed and governed, has the opportunity to cost our business a lot more as well. And then, I'm talking about governance, but, also compliance, right? Especially in heavily regulated industries, healthcare, finance spring to mind in terms of, HIPAA, high trust, Sarbanes-Oxley, GDPR if you're in Europe. All of these things have very, very stringent compliance requirements when it comes to cloud data. And if we don't have that visibility, then that data isn't being secured and protected and managed properly. That becomes a breach of compliance issue as well. So lots of things to consider as it comes to the cloud, and there certainly are tools that can help.
Great. Thanks for covering that. Now, backing up and protecting your company's data, that takes money. What can companies do to keep those costs under control? Julia, since you started us on the last one, Sam, why didn't you start us on this one?
Sure thing. Yeah, I mean, I kind of started a little bit earlier, I guess, with, the cloud is not a charity. Firstly, just understand the different payment models and where costs can be introduced. So from a backup and recovery perspective, we are creating copies of data, right? And that is going to consume storage. So understanding the different types of storage options that you have available to you and what their strengths and sometimes their weaknesses are. Are they optimized for performance or are they optimized for long-term retention is typically the most common that we see. And making sure that data is automatically tiered across those in line with any kind of policies that you might have would be my first suggestion. The next piece is, backup is an operation. It's going to consume compute as well. So just understanding how big is your environment and making sure that you right size the instances that the backup appliance lives on is right sized to make sure that, again, you're achieving that performance, but you're not introducing overspend. And then the final piece I would say is around traffic, right? Break it down as easy as possible. Typically, traffic charges are incurred when we're going across regions. So in AWS, maybe we've got something that's on US East 1 and we're backing it up to US West 1. That is going to incur a traffic fee because we're going from one of the provider's data centers to another. But if you keep data within region, you don't see those traffic costs. So again, understanding the criticality of your application, whether or not it needs that geographic separation between it, is going to be huge. And then I think I'll stop there and just leave some for Julie as well.
Sure,
I'll just keep going.
Yeah. Yeah, like Sam said, so understanding the data transfer costs, because then you can try to minimize unnecessary data transfers and leverage data compression. That's something people usually they don't think about, but deduplication and compression can really help to reduce the storage costs overall. So very important to also remember that. And I would also add from all the points that Sam said, monitoring and optimizing. So track the costs of everything that you're doing, your backups, the data transfer, etc. So you can identify what can you make better, what you're not using, you could shut it down, or backup resources that are not being utilized that you can utilize better. So just have all that in mind. I think also, yeah, monitoring is very important.
Yeah, just monitoring also helps, like you can proactively forecast this stuff as well, right? Just understanding like the different degrees or methods of data protection have available to you in the cloud. The native snapshot is pretty much the primary mechanism that each and every person uses. You don't even need a software tool like Veeam to take a native snapshot. You can go in there and create that manually. You could script it. And snapshots are great. Again, it's native. It helps us offer the best RPO, recovery point objective, right? So how often are we backing up? How much data can we afford to lose? But that's also very quick to recover from, our recovery time objective. So when something goes wrong, how quickly can we resume our operations? But the downside of a snapshot is it lives on some of the most expensive storage in the cloud. So I'm going to go back to the AWS example. you know, a snapshot in AWS lives on an EBS volume, and that is charged at 5 cents per gigabyte per month. 5 cents doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're taking multiple snapshots of multiple machines that are multiple gigabytes in size, it adds up really quickly. And then if you have retention requirements that say that you need to keep this for any duration of time, the vast majority of companies at least store their data for a year. Again, you start getting into healthcare and finance where you have to store data for 6, 7, 10 years, if not indefinitely. Well, that's going to get real expensive real quick. So then turning to something like object storage, so Amazon S3 and all the different classes that come with that offer us a fantastic opportunity to retain our data in line with how we should be, but also cut costs. So even the most expensive tier of Amazon S3 is less than half of that 5 cents per gig per month. It's either 2.3 or 2.4 cents per gig per month. And as you get to lower performance tiers, like archival class tiers, you're getting down to fractions of a cent per gig per month. It's like 0.0099 cents per gig per month. Comes at the trade-off. There are data retrieval fees, and retrieval can take longer. But you know, if you're looking at a backup that is 5 years old, what's the likelihood of you having to recover from it? Pretty small. So.
And if I can add one last thing, I don't know who's watching this webinar, but also it's important to raise awareness about cost optimization throughout the whole company. So this is what FinOps does. You know, everyone should first have access to budget, to the billing, because if everyone has access and understands, they'll work together. It's a teamwork, so everyone works together towards that cloud cost optimization, you know, reducing costs. Otherwise, if it's just the finance team thinking about that and the IT engineering team is not thinking about that, and they're the ones, you know, clicking and with just a few line of codes deploying resources, it's gonna get very expensive. So I think, you know, having this culture of cost optimization across the whole company.
Such a great point, Julia. I mean, like, we're always looking at it from a technology and tooling perspective, but that culture piece, because you've got to avoid that bill shock. You just see it so many times, like, because you're being billed in arrears based on your consumption for the month. Like, you get that bill through and we see tens, hundreds of thousands, if not millions.
Exactly.
You just don't expect it. So the culture
and
piece
usually exactly, and usually teams are siloed, so they don't communicate between each other. So I think that's important, right? So the communication and having the awareness of the company's goals, which is basically, you know, reduce costs.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, since security goes hand in hand with data protection, do companies need to look at on-premises and cloud data protection differently? Also, what else do they need to take into consideration with this? And Julia, why don't you start us on this one, please?
Sure. I think the most important thing to keep in mind when moving to the cloud is that it's a shared responsibility model. So there is a misconception that people, when they move to the cloud, the companies, when they move to the cloud, they think that their data is safe. But the shared responsibility model is the cloud provider will handle the security of the cloud, and the customer is responsible for the security in the cloud. So meaning the data, etc., all their apps, you know, and they, a lot of times they don't know, and then they don't protect their data, and something happens, they lose their data. So very important to, you know, use all the tools that you can, services that are available to you to secure your data. Very important. I might add, but yeah, Sam, go ahead. I'm like trying to remember everything.
Yeah, no. I mean, shared responsibility is the huge piece, right? And I think that it's something that's often overlooked. And there's countless situations out there, well documented, where, you know, I'm transitioning to the cloud, I'm transitioning all responsibility to that provider, is evidenced as a misconception, right? You are transitioning some degree of responsibility, but like Julia says, like the degree of responsibility differs whether you're consuming infrastructure as a service. As you go to platform as a service, you give even more responsibility to the provider, and then software as a service even more. But the one thing that holds true, it is your data and you are responsible for that. And if you value that, you better well secure and protect it, right?
Yeah.
I think another thing that Jeff asked was, is there a difference between, on-premises security and public cloud security? It's a really good question. Again, I think there's a misconception out there that the public cloud is less secure than on-premises. I don't agree with that. I would actually argue that sometimes it's easier to architect securely in the cloud. Like Julia mentioned, best practice, well-architected frameworks, a number of services, some free, some paid for, are all out there to help you along that. But the premise remains the same between on-premises and the cloud. It's just that different tooling and different ways of going about it. The 3-2-1 rule, 3 different copies of your data, 2 different types of media, 1 off-site. Same applies in the cloud, but off-site could be in the same cloud provider, it's just a different region. Then we start thinking about other things like physical separation on premises, right? Physical separation for security boundaries, systems. How do we architect for that in someone else's data center? Well, it's just logical separation. So in AWS, it's accounts that are considered security boundaries. In Google Cloud, it's projects. Then we start to look at data access, right? So who has access between these accounts, or what services has access between these accounts, and making sure that we have the least privilege access required to do the job, no more, no less.
Yeah.
And then just like other pieces that spring to mind, immutability, right? So putting data in that write once, read many state. So if the account ever is breached, they aren't able to encrypt, destroy, corrupt your data. And then encryption as well.
Encryption,
like more and
yes.
more exfiltration. Yeah, more and more exfiltration attempts are happening, right? People trying to take the data, whether it's in a production data set or in a backup data set, and extort you and say, we'll put this out on the web if you don't pay us. So encrypting that, even if they can get access to it, they can't read.
Yeah, and encrypting both data in transit and at rest, both are great security best practices. Yeah, I think you touched on all important points, Sam.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you both of you for breaking all of that down for us. That was great. Now, we have been talking a lot about cloud management and backup. I think it's time now that we see all of this in action. Give us some demos, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we've had some troubles with me sharing my screen, so if you can just hang on a second just to make sure and confirm that it comes up, and then I can get started.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Should be seeing a dashboard. Success. Yeah. Awesome. Well,
Yes.
I guess I'll get started. That Veeam, pretty much everyone on the call probably knows about Veeam. We are the #1 leading data protection vendor worldwide. We've been around for about 10 years, just over, and we got started really in protecting virtualized environments, VMware, right? And the reason why we got started is we built a purpose-built native product that used VMware tooling and technologies in order to provide best-in-class backup and recovery, instead of trying to take the agent-based approach that was best fit for physical machines. We quickly grew, more than 400,000 customers worldwide. And as the first major change that we made was to introduce agents so we could protect physical machines. The demand was so high for it. So we did introduce agents, and you could have used those agents in the cloud, but as more and more workloads are being transitioned to the cloud, it's incredibly important to us that we took that same mantra. We built a purpose-built product to take best advantage and offer the best degree of protection. So we have a number of modules within our platform that bolt into our core product. So you have a centralized, federated management, monitoring, observability, governance of your entire hybrid or multi-cloud environment. But again, there's specific modules for AWS, for Azure, for Google Cloud. So with that being the new stuff, this is kind of what I want to show you. So this is the Veeam Backup for AWS interface. if you've got your appliance and everything configured, this is what you'll be greeted with when you log in. Just on a security lens, there is multi-factor authentication login as well, so your best practice. But this dashboard's really helpful to help me govern and understand my environment. So we can see here, whether I've had how my backup jobs are running. Everything looks good except for one failed, so I might want to go and look into that. Again, the successful policy tasks are very similar to this. This is interesting from the cloud creep perspective we were talking about earlier, because now I can see that within AWS, I've only got 2 of my 7 EC2 instances protected. So, and the same goes for EFS, only 1 of 3. So I've got some backup of some EC2 and some file system to do, but RDS is in a good stead. Can take a look at storage. So again, this is helping me understand how much I'm consuming from our different S3 tiers. And then a bottlenecks overview is, again, just there to help me right-size my environment. Is this appliance optimized to deal with the number of policies that I have protecting my data, the number of accounts and instances that I'm protecting? And if not, do I maybe need to go out and downsize, scale up my deployment in order to better protect everything without blowing out my costs? But this is what you're greeted with. If it's the first time that you're deploying it, you actually are greeted with this screen. It's the configuration screen. These are all marked as to-dos. So the first thing that you'd have to do is add at least 1 AWS IAM role. So the reason why this is here is because this is granting permissions between different accounts. And the reason why is, as we spoke about earlier, accounts are deemed as security boundaries. So we will always recommend having a dedicated account for this appliance, your backup data to live in. And that's, again, because it's logically separated from production, whether it's a single production account, multiple across the entire company. But again, those 2 accounts can't talk to each other. We need to broker that access between them. So this is where we utilize IAM roles, identity and access management. And here I can define any number of IAM roles that I want. Again, we would recommend that you be very granular and specific, giving them that least privilege access. It's PULP, principle of least privilege. So this machine, and then also the people using the software, have the right amount of permissions to get their job done, no more, no less. We also can configure our repositories. So these are the S3 buckets where we will store our data. So again, we're not just a snapshot orchestrator. We absolutely do that, but then we'll take that image-based backup, we'll compress it, and then we'll store it in that more cost-effective object storage for that longer-term retention. So here you can see a couple of different tiers, S3, Glacier Deep Archive. Unfortunately, I don't have immutability enabled in this appliance, but we can enable immutability through the AWS console. So again, like set immutability for 2 years. Once that backup is committed to that bucket, it cannot be changed, it cannot be encrypted, it cannot be deleted. So again, a good security practice here. And then the final piece to configure are our workers. So these are essentially little data movers that live on an EC2 instance and will be spun up whenever we need to perform some of the data protection tasks. If we're just taking a snapshot, we don't need to spin up these workers. But when we do create that image-based backup and compress it, we do need to consume some compute. So we will dynamically, that point in time, spin up the EC2 instance. When the task is performed, shut it down. So again, from a cost lens, that's fantastic, because that means now I'm only paying for compute as and when I need it, versus it just sitting there running idly for 23 of the 24 hours a day, maybe, where I'm having to pay for that when it's not doing anything. So those are the main things that you need to configure. I think actually the last piece that I'll show you is these portal users. So this is for role-based access. So here we've got different roles that we can assign access to this appliance, again, from a security perspective, right? So I'm a portal administrator. I have full access to the entire appliance, but maybe I want to give just recovery capabilities to an application owner so they can self-service, right? So application owner A experiences some sort of outage. He can come in, he can see his workload. He can only perform the workload. He can't play with any configuration behind this appliance. He can't start backing stuff up. He can only perform the recovery. So that's huge there. But anyway, that's the configuration. It takes about 10 minutes to get it started, and then you're really ready to start creating your first policy. So we do use policy-based automation rather than manual processes to really just make it as simple as possible to protect this, right? So you're not spending 24/7 babysitting backup. You can set it up, it's good to go, and then you can go off and focus on other strategic initiatives. But we've got different tabs, one for EC2, one for RDS, all 6 different flavors are supported. We also have EFS, our file shares, and then VPCs as well. And if we have time in the demo, I'll make sure that we touch on the VPCs. But I'm just going to edit this policy and just walk you through how easy it is to do. So we'll give it a name and a description. You know, I can just call it test for the sake of this. And then we just start defining our sources. So firstly, which IAM role do we want to utilize? I only had one there because I've gone against best practice, left it wide open because there's no sensitive data in here and it just makes it easier for demos. But just select that IAM role. I can check the permissions. So, you know, instead of getting a failure, I can see here that it will work. And then we can specify our regions. So right now, I'm only looking for EC2 instances within the US East Virginia region, but I can look at all 19 regions that AWS has across the globe and add them all here and find all the EC2 instances in those too. And then at that point, we can see those resources that need to be protected. So do I want to protect all resources, EC2 instances, within that US Virginia East region, or do I want to protect specific resources? And I can break that down by instance or by tag. And this is super important from a cloud creep perspective, right? Because we were talking about some of the challenges when it comes to governance, right? Workloads being instantiated, but not being protected. Here's how we can combat that. We can just say, hey, any instance that comes online within this region, start backing it up automatically. Or what we see a number of doing is building policies based on tags. So we might have like a diamond, gold, silver, and bronze tag that have different RPOs and RTOs associated. So anything that has the diamond tag might be backed up, every 15 minutes because we have a really low tolerance for data loss. But whereas something that's tagged with bronze might only be backed up daily. Again, helps with cost control. Again, really big for that governance and cloud creep piece. Can also choose to exclude specific resources if I want, or exclude the attached EBS volumes on some of those and just protect the EC2 instance itself. We then work on to the guest processing settings. So here is where we can enable those application-aware snapshots. We use VSS for Windows instances. Anything for Linux, you can script. So you can use a script here, or you can even use scripts for Windows as well. But again, VSS for Windows for application-aware snapshots. So we get that zero data loss backup and recovery. And then here we start to select our targets. Where do we want to back this up to? So first option is, do I want to replicate my snapshots? So I can take a snapshot of this policy that lives in US Virginia or US East Virginia and replicate it to another area of the world if I want, or onto the other side of the country on the West Coast. So and then do we want to do backups? So again, we orchestrate the snapshot creation, but again, we can create those image-based backups and press, and then are stored on much, much more cost-effective object storage. So here I've got it turned on. Where do I want to store them? The backups will be here. My archives will be in an archive class. And then we go on to our scheduling settings. So I've got my dailies, my weeklies, my monthlies. We can edit my daily settings here. It's super, super simple. So you can see here, hey, like I'm only taking one snapshot, one replica, and one backup a day. I'm going to keep snapshots, 2 of them. I'm going to keep 2 replicas. I'm going to keep my backups for 7 days. And it's very similar on the weeklies, except we've got the days of the weeks, and then monthlies, we'll figure it's our months. How long do we want to keep that stuff for? And I'll go in and show you something cool around this in just a moment. Next, we can assign custom tags to our snapshots. We can also copy the tags from the source volume. So we spoke about the importance of that tagging culture. I really cannot, push that hard enough to instill a tagging culture within your organization. Some general settings. So if I get a failed policy, how many times is it going to retry? A health check. So we use a CRC check in the metadata to verify the backup's integrity. And we've also got the option to do notifications as well. So I could put my email address in here and only notify me if I have a failure. So again, it's kind of that set it and forget it mindset. come in, create your policies, and then just let it go and do its thing. And only if there's a failure or a warning, you're gonna get that communication. And then in that kind of FinOps mindset and avoiding, bill shock, overspend, whatever it might be, we proactively forecast how much this is going to cost you each and every single month based on the size of the instance or instances that you're pointing at, the list prices of what AWS charges. And again, it's the same for Azure, it's the same for Google. And then based on a 3% daily change rate. So I can see here, it's going to cost me $2.29 per month to protect this machine, which is huge, right? And it even breaks it down by, the pieces that we were talking about earlier. And I say machine, I mean machines, because there's 2 in here. But I can go back into my schedule and start to dynamically change this. So maybe like this is a super mission critical application, and I'm going to take a snapshot every single hour. And I don't know, I'm going to keep 100 different snapshots. And I'm going to keep my backups for, I don't know, maybe a month. But then on my monthly settings, I've got to keep these for 7 years. I don't even know what 7 times 365 is, but I'm just going to put 1,000 days in and apply it. Go back to my cost estimator, and now I can see that has changed based on my new settings. So again, I can proactively forecast how much this is going to cost for all these different machines within this policy and avoid that bill shock. Finally, is a little summary of everything that went down. Is it good? I can click finish, I'll click cancel because I'm not going to commit my changes. But now that policy is created, I can choose to start it now. If not, it's just going to go off and run and do it. So that's really how easy it is to do backups. We can do the same for RDS. So, all 6 different flavors of relational database services available in AWS. We can do it for Elastic File Shares, and then also our VPCs as well, and the different configurations and attributes. Again, I'll check at the end if I've got enough time to show you this, because I personally think that this is super cool. But backup is nothing without recovery. And I want to show you how easy recovery is. So here's my, the 2 instances that I've been protecting. I can see them here. I can see which policy's been applied to them, see how many different restore points, my most latest restore point, which was today in the middle of the night, how big the backup is, how big the archives are, where it's stored. And now I can go in and choose to restore this. So let's say it's this Windows machine. I've got a number of different options when it comes to recover. I can choose to restore the entire instance. So here I've got the EC2 instance. I can go in and pick the recovery point. So if I knew that, I don't know, ransomware infected my systems on, let's just say May 25th, my birthday, I'm going to want to recover from my May 24th because I know that will be clean. So, easily select that, click apply, hit next. Again, the different IAM roles or temporary access keys to broker that and enable that, those processes, again, acting on these privileged access. Where do I want to recover it to? So do I want to recover it to its original location, overwrite the existing instance, or maybe I want to recover it to a new location or with new settings. So I could choose a different account, or I could choose a different region or different settings. Again, give it a reason. We'll get a summary. Oh, see, I've got a configuration issue. So it's going to tell me what I need to go and fix. See, the original instance with a private IP. So I would have to restore this to a new location with new settings. And that's where I could choose the encryption that Julia was talking about, settings, network. But again, provide the reason, summary, and click done, and that will go off and recover everything. But that's the entire instance. We can also do the volume, the EBS volume that's attached to it. But then we've also got file level recovery options. So maybe it is just some super important file that has been corrupted and I need to retrieve that. Why would I recover the entirety of this instance if it's just an individual file? So I could click file level recovery, same process as before. And it's going to give me a URL to navigate to. I don't even know how to operate Google Chrome, but it's what works with this platform for the webinar. But it opens up a new browser, and here I've got this Explorer-like functionality to go and find this file. So maybe I know the file name, I can type that in here. Or maybe I want to go in and start driving down and go in, I don't know, it's like a specific file. Of course, there's no data in that one. I don't know, anything in documents? let's just say this one. And I can just add this to my recovery list just by clicking here. And I can select a number of files here. And then up here, I see my restore list. That's the file. And then do I want to download this to the local machine? Or we can utilize the AWS Kinesis service to re-inject that back into its original location as well. So that's available as an option when you're starting up that file level recovery. So again, restore options are massively powerful, again, from full instances to individual files and folders. Same for RDS, same for EFS. And the beauty of Veeam is because we can protect stuff in AWS and Azure, Google Cloud, virtualized workloads on premises, vSphere, Hyper-V, AHV, Windows boxes, Linux boxes, enterprise applications. All of our products use the same Veeam backup file format, VBK. And that means we are portable. So maybe I've got a virtual machine on premises that I want to recover in AWS. Veeam's going to let you do that. Maybe I want to go from AWS to Azure, Azure back on premises, whatever it might be. Veeam is not only giving you that centralized management, but that data portability that can now be used for migrations, it can be used for recovery scenarios. Really, it's limitless. We do not charge you any extra to do that. It's the same license file, so you don't have to go out and procure any new technology. So if you do migrate one workload to a different environment, you don't have to pick up the phone and buy something new, and that license that you used to have is now just useless, redundant. The same license will just automatically, dynamically move with the workload. So that makes it huge. Jeff, how are we doing on time? Like, do you think these folks, do we have enough time to see the VPC stuff as well?
Yeah, sure. We have enough time to fit that in, I think, quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. I mean, creating the policy, I won't run through that because you guys have seen the creation of a policy. But here, I've got a number of different options when it comes to recovering my VPC. So I can restore the entire VPC or the select items. I can choose to export the entire VPC or select items. But this is the cool one. It's the comparison, right? Because if someone's gone into the AWS environment and changed one of the attributes and brought the entirety of my environment down, how do I know what's been changed so I can get things back up and running fast? So it's just a simple toggle here. Show changed attributes. Now, of course, nothing's changed, so it's not going to show me anything. But here I can see all of the different attributes that are available. And I'm going to scan quickly so you can't see some of the numbers. But, multiple different values here that I can choose. And then, again, if it's show changed only attributes, now I know exactly what's changed. I can either export it or restore that very select item, and my environment is back up and running. So that's the VPC piece. So I will stop that demo there and come back and see what else we got to cover.
Oh, that was absolutely fantastic. So thank you for doing that. I think this is a great time for us to bring up a poll for all of our viewers. So everyone, we'd love to get your answer to this poll. What is your cloud strategy? And while we're waiting for everyone to get their answer into the poll, I think we should jump into some Q&A because we've already had questions coming in. And our first question, this one actually came from Ryan. And Ryan, I'm calling you out because you're hitting on something that Sam talked about a little bit, but now we can elaborate on that for you. So here's the question. In a DR scenario, can Veeam replicate VMs from on-prem to the cloud, and then once on-prem is back running properly, replicate the server back?
Yeah, it's a really good point and a really good question, and there's multiple different answers to your question, Ryan. So there's multiple ways that we can go about replication to the cloud. We see a number of folks doing VMware Cloud on AWS, Azure VMware Solution, VMware Engine on Google Cloud, I think it's called, or Google Cloud VMware Engine. I don't know what the acronym is, but we support all the different VMware clouds on the major platforms, and of course that can be utilized in a hybrid scenario. It can be used DR. We can also utilize something called Veeam Cloud Connect, which will help replicate VMs into the cloud as well. We see some folks doing that on Azure. In fact, that can be deployed from the Azure Marketplace itself. But using the cloud as a hot site is great for very mission critical applications where we don't necessarily want to maintain a secondary site, but they're a hot standby, so they are there and they are costing you money. So that might be great for those mission critical applications, and we certainly do support that. But what about the applications that are less critical? I think everything's critical today. We can do a direct restore from a Veeam backup, whether that backup lives on premises or it's on object storage, and restore it into the cloud, right? So it's not this replication, but it's the most recent backup that can be restored into the cloud. So that's not like a hot failover or fail back, but it's just one other option that we give folks to be able to recover into the cloud that doesn't necessarily require that hot site, especially for those organizations that are more cost conscious or for applications that are less critical than others. I hope that answered your question.
Oh, that was great. And Sam, you've done a lot of talking, so I'll give your voice a little bit of a rest. And Julia,
Thanks.
I'll throw this next question at you. What are some general best practices and tips for increased efficiency?
So I would say regularly. Okay, I thought I was on mute. Sorry. Regularly assess, your resources that you're utilizing, so you avoid over provisioning and and you should be optimizing them. Also, use automation, use infrastructure as code instead of doing everything manually, because then you can reproduce faster, you can document everything. And infrastructure as code, there are a lot of tools, so a lot of cloud native tools. AWS has great tools, the CDK, CloudFormation. Terraform also is a great one because you can use across all the cloud providers. There is Pulumi. So infrastructure as code, just a few lines of code. You can, provision a resource or increase more or reduce. So I think these ones also maybe, keep monitoring your environment so you can see where you can improve your resources, add more or cut back. I think monitoring is very important as well. Yeah, so these tips.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, next question. And I'm betting both of you will have some suggestions here. So Julia, we'll start with you while Sam's voice is recovering, and then he can jump in. What are your recommendations for centralizing management, security, and visibility?
Okay, so management, I would say implement a centralized identity management tool. All the cloud providers, they have great tools, and they implement single sign-on because it makes it easier for the people that are managing the users and for the user experience as well, because they can log in and to all the accounts and apps from a single console. So basically federated users. Also use security information and event management tool. Again, the cloud providers, they have tools, native tools to collect, analyze, and correlate security incidents. So keep monitoring them. What else, Sam?
Yeah, I think just like through a backup lens is trying to achieve something my mother said I'd never have, which is my cake and eat it, right? We've the number of organizations that are living in a hybrid or multi-cloud environment is like 94%. Pretty much everyone lives in this kind of environment. And all of these are very disparate and very different, not only in the way that they operate, but in the way that we should be protecting, right? The way that I protect a physical machine is different to a virtual machine, is different to a cloud machine. So when I say trying to have your cake and eat it, is what you want to do is you want to try and standardize on a single vendor that is capable of protecting this broad range of different types of environments and different types of systems and instances, but you don't want to try and take square pegs and put them in round holes, right? So what we see is those folks either will try and take agents and apply them to everything just so they can stand, right? Agents on a physical machine, agents on a virtual machine. You get an agent, you get an agent, everyone gets an agent. But when you're dealing with hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of agents, it's expensive and it's a nightmare. So you want to go with that native approach, but that often comes at the cost of bringing in a new vendor for all these different environments, right? I've got one backup solution for virtual, I've got one backup solution for AWS, another one for Azure. And they're all different tools with different capabilities, different learning curves, different costs and licensing structures, and like nightmare. Just, it doesn't need to be that way. Veeam has a hugely broad portfolio of solutions, again, all purpose built for what they're trying to protect, whether it's cloud host, spoken about today, cloud native, like containerized workloads, whether it's, you know, all the different flavors of virtualization on-prem or traditional, you know, Windows and Linux boxes. We can protect them all from one single interface with one single license, and then the data portability, the application mobility between all of them. So as your environment changes, your strategy changes, we're a vendor that will flex with you without prescribing to you what you should be doing.
Awesome. Great. Okay. Next question. What can you tell us about the size of the hardware environment needed to power backup and recovery infrastructure? And Sam, you're on a roll, so why don't you just start us off on this one?
It's a really good question, and I'm probably going to have to look it up to give you exact numbers. But you know, Veeam's platform is modular. So we've got like our core component that is Veeam backup and replication. This is what gave birth to Veeam, and I believe like Veeam backup and replication is a 10 gig download. And then we've got all of these modular components that can be added on, plugged in, integrated with that as and when you need them, right? So if I'm living a wholly on premises, nothing in the cloud, I would just have Veeam backup and replication, and I don't have all of this ancillary compute and hardware and storage requirements that I don't need. But then as I grow into the cloud, I would literally just deploy that appliance into AWS. They will be connected together. And now it's right sized, it's optimized. And then the same for, or maybe I don't have on-prem and I'm just in AWS only. You don't have to deploy the 10 gig VBR piece. You just deploy that little Veeam backup for AWS appliance. So it varies from solution to solution, environment to environment, based on needs are. But that flexibility and modularity is huge and something folks really enjoy.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Julia, I'm going to start you off with this question, and we are getting closer to time, so I think this will probably be the last one we can hit. What can you tell us about immutability in backup solutions?
Great. So immutability refers to making your data secure, so no one can change it, encrypt it, modify, delete it, and it's great against ransomware. And with Veeam, we make it easier because it's just checking a box when you're creating your backups repositories, and you can enable it. They call it a warm model. So write once, read many. And your data becomes immutable. You set a time, so just make sure that you don't set more than what you need. Otherwise, you're gonna keep incurring costs. But set a time that you want that data to be immutable, and no one will be able to touch it. Even the root account can't modify that data. So I think it's a great addition that Veeam added. At least the Veeam backup for AWS has it added in the last with with the last product, their last release, and everyone is using it a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up like there's two other things that I want to cover there, and you covered one of them, which is like be cognizant of how long you set your immutability duration for, especially if you're governed by a compliance that says that you have to delete data at a specific point. Because if you cannot store data for more than 3 years, but you set the bucket to be immutable or the objects to be immutable for 4 years, now you're out of compliance, and like, you are not going to be able to delete that for another year. So be cognizant of that. And then the other piece is look at what level the immutability is at. And what I mean by that is, we're dealing with object storage. And when we're dealing with that from a backup perspective, is that immutability at the bucket level or is it at the object level? Because again, this cannot be changed or deleted once it's been committed. So if your solution that you're using does it at the bucket level, right, and you write your full backup, and now it cannot be changed or deleted, and it's immutable at the bucket level, your incremental backup isn't going to write to it. So now you're taking full backups as frequently as you need to, and that is not efficient. So make sure the solution that you have is doing it at the object level, so you can have the incremental backups still have the immutability. Just something to think about there, because not all solutions are created equally, I guess.
Okay. Thanks for answering those questions. I think it's time for us to move on to the poll results, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing. There they are. Okay. Sam, Julia, I would love to get your take real quick before we have to wrap up on what you're seeing in these cloud strategy responses.
I mean, on the surface of things, it looks like it aligns very, very well to industry data. What's that? It is 81.8% of you have at least something in the cloud, and again, without the 4. I don't know if the we live in the cloud means we have nothing on premises, but mostly there and have a few things in the cloud. You're in a hybrid cloud model. So I think hopefully this information's been really pertinent for you guys. And then the folks that are solely in the data center, I'm sure you probably have cloud on your roadmap somewhere. So hopefully this has been good insights as you continue on that journey.
Yeah. Yeah, I like Sam said, it's what we usually see at Veeam. And I hope everyone got something out of this webinar and, is not afraid of moving to the cloud, because moving to the cloud has a lot of benefits. So I hope it was helpful for everyone.
Well, I thought it was fantastic, and it is time to wrap up. So, Sam, Julia, thank you so much for sharing so much useful information today. This has been wonderful. Now, for our viewers, if you asked a question during the Q&A and we weren't able to get to it, you will get an answer via email. Also, today's webinar will be available on demand. If you want to review anything that we've talked about today or share the webinar with colleagues who might be interested as well. And thanks again to all of you for watching today's webinar.